Okay, the little last installment of little toots for this week is clipping masks. And clipping masks allow us to hide and reveal information on a layer without having to delete it or make up silly little mats that you put over the top of the edge of your artboard. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a brush and I'm just going to do some scribbling. I'm just going to create a big old scribble. There's my scribble. And I'm going to show you how Clipping Mask works first at a very basic level, and then we'll do a little more advanced work. So on this document I'm just working a blank one, but there is a file that you will use in a little bit along with me that was in your week 5 exercise folder. So here, I've drawn something. I have no artwork selected. So the first step to get into a mask is to deal with a selection. So you have to select the artwork, which now it's selected. And what I want to do is focus my attention to a panel called Transparency. It usually is one of the panels that is up by default. If you don't see it, you'll have to go to Window, Transparency, and open that thing up. Transparency has several things going on here. First, it has blending modes. So here are blending modes that we could apply to an element, a layer or artwork. We also have opacity. You can set your opacity to a range of 0 to 100. So let's talk about, first, just about opacity. So opacity, as I start to lower it, you can see that we're seeing through. Well, it's kind of hard to tell if we're seeing through, but it's becoming more and more transparent. Back at 100%, it's fully opaque. So if I were to throw down another piece of brush strokes, maybe I'll just go this way. Now, if I were to select my blue strokes and lower opacity, you start to see the result. You can see through it. Opacity works sometimes to achieve the sort of interaction between layers that we're looking for. Other times you want to find something a little more dynamic. Well, lowering opacity seems to weaken the artwork of a layer, but sometimes you just want to see through a window, or you just want opacity to work the way it works. The other option would be to use blending modes. Blending modes, the first group are a darkening group. So like multiply is going to take the darks of the blues and multiply them against the darks of the reds. So you can see how that gets darker. Color burn, similar, just not as dramatic. And then we have the lightening group. So it's going to do the opposite. It's going to take the lights of the blues and the lights of the reds and sort of make them interact together. So this is a nice way to go through and check out different blending modes that allow layers to interact without just going to the default transparency, which a lot of people go to because they understand transparency and it's hard to understand blending modes. But the good thing about Illustrator's blending modes is that there's very few of them compared to the blending modes you'd find in Photoshop or After Effects. So what I recommend is just kind of playing around with these if you never have and seeing what the results are as you go through the different groups. Yeah, that's basically it. So you have darkening groups on the top. The second group, you have the lighten group. Next, you have a contrast group. And then we have sort of an opposites group where things kind of go into opposite land. Kind of hard to tell here, but usually it looks like a negative deal. And then we have the color and light groups, which will either remove or add to the hue, or remove or add to the saturation, or just color artwork, or deal with the light value of a layer. So those are the different ways for us to get layers to blend with each other. I'm going to delete the blue strokes just so I'm back dealing with the red one. If you look at the area beneath transparency, we have this box that, and it shows you a little thumbnail of the artwork that is currently selected. And this artwork, basically, as it is just going to stand on its own. But there's this empty spot to the right of that thumbnail, which is where we can start working with our clipping mask. And if you double click on that empty spot, it goes into the clipping. And the clipping is a way in which we're using black, white, and grayscale information to hide or reveal the paint or the pixels, whatever it is, of that layer. In this case, it goes right to black, and black means hide. So anywhere where there is black, the artwork will not be seen. Anywhere where there is white, the artwork will be revealed. So if I were to go grab my ellipse tool and set my stroke to none, my fill to white, and draw a star, where did I get star? I guess I was having a quick little thought in my head of whether or not I should use a star, but I'm going with the circle. So if I just draw a circle, now what you see is the thumbnail on the right in the transparency area is my clipping mask. Whatever is white is going to reveal the artwork that is in the thumbnail immediately to the left there. In this case, it's my brush strokes. So anytime I add more circles, it's going to reveal more of that image. So white reveals, black hides. I am going to select all of those circles and just get rid of them again. So I'm left with basically, you don't see black, but it's black. It's like invisible black by default. It can be anything. You could grab more paint and just say that you want to paint with white, and I could paint the word mask, and wherever that white paint is, you can see it in the little thumbnail. The word mask is going to reveal the selected artwork that we're trying to do with this little clipping deal. I will select all again and delete those. Similar thing works with grayscale. I'm going to go back to my ellipse tool, and I'm going to set my fill to be a, whoops, why did I just move that? To a gray. And now when I draw my, it doesn't have a fill. That was interesting. There we go. So there is a gray circle in the clipping mask. The gray circle isn't quite white, isn't quite black. It's somewhere in the middle, which means that it's going to be somewhere in the middle of that opacity or transparency. So if it's about a 50% gray, which is what I have here, that means that we're at 50% opacity of whatever it is that we reveal. If I go back and change my fill color to white and add another one like over here, then you end up seeing, it's kind of hard to tell, it looks like I drew a red box. So let's do that one over here. There. So there's a difference between a white circle and a gray circle. Fully opaque, semi-transparent. Alright. So gradients would work. Anything that you can draw with in the clipping mask is going to create some sort of appearance of that artwork. The most important part of working in a clipping mask is knowing how to get out of the clipping mask. Also called an opacity mask. You know what? Actually, this is called an opacity mask, but it's clipping the artwork. So it's kind of a, I don't know, maybe I messed up my terminology. There is a clipping mask that you can do in the layers too. Shuzbutt. I should have thought ahead. I always do this. This happens every year. I always do this every year. Brutal. You think I would learn? All right, clipping. Let's remove the term clipping from our terminology, and let's say opacity mask, because we're dealing with the transparency panel. We're dealing with opacity, and we're dealing with these shades of black, white, and grayscale, and it's converting the artwork into some sort of opacity. Whoo! Opacity mask. All right, so to get if you look at your layers panel when you're doing something like this, you're in the opacity mask like editing mode. You have to get out of it if you want to go back and do any work. So that means you have to click back on the thumbnail for the artwork that you had applied the mask, and all of a sudden layers come back to normal. All the artwork kind of comes back to a visible state. That's a very important step of moving in and out of this opacity mask. So if you can see what happens when you click on the two thumbnails, it has an effect on the layers, it has an effect on its appearance in the canvas, and those should be telltale signs about what you're doing and where you're at. You can choose to not clip the mask, and that would do the invert, which means that everything else will be considered white as well. So just that gray circle is affected. And then you can invert the mask, which, well, hold on, come back over here. It has another effect, and if you go to clip and invert, everything kind of changes. So there's some different settings that you can do here on your mask. Alright, I'm going to select those, get rid of them. I want to delete my mask, disable opacity mask. Okay. Well, I guess I'm just going to move on anyway, so delete. Alright, so now what I want to do is I want to open up a file that you have, and it's going to be called clipping masks. Should have named it opacity masks. Maybe I'll change that before I upload it. Nah, whatever. We'll just work with it. I can make it work. Alright, here is a file I put together. It contains some artwork from an animation I did a while ago. And then I just made this TV in the background just for the sake of showing you how and when you might want to work with these sorts of masks. The artwork of this hairstylist and her client I want to put on the TV, but the artwork is big and it goes beyond the edges of my TV. So a very easy solution is to just use an opacity mask for all that artwork of the two ladies. I am going to select all of the artwork of the two ladies by clicking on the right end of the layer for the artwork layer, and I end up everything is selected and it's all shown in green. That means that everything is selected just on that layer. The TV is locked, the background's locked, so it's just everything on the artwork layer. If I look at my transparency panel, there's all the two women, all that artwork is there, and there's the empty spot for my opacity mask. If I double click on that thing, it defaults to white or black, so everything's hidden. That means that I need to come in, I need to draw a shape that is white. So I'm just going to make sure I have no stroke just because it's easier to think about fills. And I'm just going to draw a box that is just a little bit bigger than the screen of my TV. And that is the white area that will reveal the artwork behind the television screen. So now I don't have any legs sticking out, the hair, elbows. It's all nice and tidy. And this is something that can be applied, in this sort of a sense, or even in the like the confines of your artboard. So if you had an artboard where you had gone in and let's see, I'll just get some blue. All right. Yeah, so if you had all this sketching stuff, and I'll zoom out a little bit. I have no idea what I'm drawing. I'm just scribbling. And over here, maybe there's like an eye hidden in the middle of all this. Yeah. I got junk over here, but this is what my artwork ends up looking like. Maybe there's even like a couple of red lines and something over here, and you know, I think I want to bring some brown in, but you know, whatever. I'm just kind of bleh. So if this is what my art looks like, and I go, man, I'd really like to just see, you know, how this thing would look maybe on the artboard and not going past it. I could just select all of that path work, go to my transparency palette, double click on the opacity mask area. Come on, why aren't you doing it? You're not doing it. Well, that's interesting. It's not letting me click. Why not? Selected all of it. Well, that's funky. That's funky. Let me do it now. Okay. Whatever. Okay, now I'm going to put white. I'm just going to draw a white box that is the dimension of my artboard. Donk. And that kind of cleans up all that stuff. So that's another use, but generally that use right there is saved for the actual clipping mask, which is what I was getting mixed up with earlier, calling the opacity masks clipping masks. And it is important for us to know the difference between these, by the way. Exam. So I'm just going to backtrack here. Get out of this. Okay. So opacity mask, that's pretty easy. You deal with the transparency window. A clipping mask is something that we deal with in the layers panel, where you could have any sort of vector shape. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a box around my artboard. This box is basically just a path. I have no fill. I could go up to my control bar up here and say that I want to make sure it's 800 pixels by 600. And then at that point, just to make sure that it's centered, I might go to my align to artboard, make sure that that's set, and then do center, center, vertical and horizontal. That guarantees that my little box that I drew there is the dimensions of my artboard, and it's also centered perfectly. So this path now is a rectangle. It has a stroke. It doesn't even need a stroke. It could be just empty. But the path is still there. The path is there, but there's no fill, there's no stroke. And as long as that path is the topmost layer, or I guess sublayer, the topmost path inside of a layer. Well, it's not going to work again. Darn it, I hate it when this happens to me. You're not going to do it because... Oh yeah, that's why. No worries. I'm just getting ahead of myself. So the topmost sublayer is the rectangle that is the dimensions of my artboard. When I select the base layer, so in this case I'm selecting layer 1, at the bottom of my layer window is a button that says Make or Release Clipping Mask. And when I click on that, it takes the path that is the topmost path and will clip everything underneath it to its boundaries. So in this case, it's just that rectangle. So to see that applied in the clipping mask file, let's go back to this work that we had done. And what I want to do is I want to get rid of the opacity mask, and I need to disable it. Release. There we go. Release. Okay. So I went to the flyout menu for the transparency panel and I chose Release Opacity Mask. Now here's the same issue with the artwork exceeding the boundaries of my television. But if I wanted to do it in a way in which I used a clipping mask instead, then I could do anything here. I could grab my pen tool, and I'm going to make it so there's no fill. I just want a path. No fill, no stroke. And I could come in and just kind of quickly rough out the shape of the television screen. I'm just kind of going wide to make sure I don't get close. And I finish the path, I close it. Now what I need to do in order to make a clipping mask work is just ensure that the path that I drew is above everything else. It's the topmost sublayer of the layer that I'm working in. And with the layer selected, not the path, but the layer, this is when I can choose Enable Clipping Mask, and it'll take whatever artwork is below that path inside that layer, and it'll clip it. The benefits of these two different techniques, well, with the opacity, you can actually get different levels of opacity. With a clipping mask, it just clips it. So you're dealing with just hidden or revealed, period. So there's no happy 50% transparency with a clipping mask. So that's the main difference between the two. Some people really like to work with the idea of black and white because this kind of goes through other programs. Photoshop has the layer masks and they operate on black and white. After Effects has different mats that you can use based on black and white information or grayscale information. So it's if you're into those other programs, you can get a grasp on that sort of idea, then maybe it's easier for you to do that here. The clipping mask though is also just kind of a nice way to deal with an entire layer. And that way you don't have to worry about selecting all the artwork. It might be really complex. There might be different types of artwork in there that wouldn't work. So a clipping mask is guaranteed to hide everything below it that's in that layer. So play around with those two techniques. You're going to have to know the difference because I'm going to test you. I'm going to have you show me basically the difference and execute these things on your exam. So get familiar with the difference between an opacity mask and a clipping mask. Alrighty.